Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polyhedron Collectorcast episode 91. I'm Steve Tudor.
I'm Andy Lewis.
I'm Sir Gill.
Evening, boys. How's it going?
Yeah.
Living the dream, Mr. Tudor. Living the dream.
Living the dream. It's more like living the wet dream, I think.
Well, you know, this year could get better, I suppose. We'd be allowed out soon at some point.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly.
I've resigned myself,
not.
basically, now to essentially for the rest of 2020, nobody's going anywhere. Christmas is cancelled, which, to be fair, is right up my flagpole. And everyone can just stay inside till 2021. We'll cancel a year and reboot it.
This isn't all just going to blow over. We can't hide in the Winchester for this one.
How?
Well, we tried that. We tried that in March. And look where it got us.
Personally, I thought it worked quite well. But I am a bit weird.
We're not going to deny that.
No. There's a lot of evidence to support that statement.
Yes, there is.
Getting by, I suppose. Yeah. I had a weird day at work, actually. I say at work, here in front of my desk. It's one of those that you kind of bundle through the day and you kind of ease through, and then there's a million meetings, and you have an hour where literally nothing happens, and I get no emails, which is very strange because I'm usually getting about 3 every 6 seconds. I get nothing for about an hour, which is nice because it means I can do other things and catch up on stuff. And then all of a sudden, I get 3 customers all at once wanting a phone call, wanting an email, wanting this and that, and it's like, leave me alone. Does anyone else get that?
I work in the legal industry, mate. It's glacial.
That's true.
3 phone calls in a week is a busy week for me.
Jeez, wow, no.
I'm starting to think I need to invest in a headset for the phone at the office.
See, I've considered that.
I'm getting RSI holding a phone to my face.
See, I've got a habit of on a mobile because I get all my office calls sent to my mobile here. I've got a habit, whenever I'm on the phone, I wander around the room. It really annoys Alora when she's in the room. She's, will you sit still? I'm like, no, I can't. I can't help walking around, talking on the phone. So I think for that reason, I just get myself a headset and be, one of those sort of high-end 80s salesmen.
Get a bell in the corner as well.
Exactly.
You struck a deal.
We actually have one in our sales office at work.
No.
Oh, salesmen love it. They love having a bell. They got to ding that bastard whenever they can.
Do. It's really quite annoying, but yeah, they do have it.
Well, it was just before I started, but my current workplace used to have one of those sales offices next door, and we had to complain because they had a bell which they rang every time they made a sale, but the walls were just plasterboard partitions between the offices. So it was like apparently like every half hour or an hour, it was like ding 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 ding. It's like crying out loud. We've got our own work to do here.
Exactly. Stop it. This is why I have soundproof cans on my head most of the time. Andy, you can't hear me. That's kind of the point.
Do you know what the worst thing is? Because I get this with the phone calls. I just do all phone calls now just on loudspeaker on my mobile because I'm at the home. I'm in the house on my own.
Yeah.
But what you don't is we get that horrible sweaty ear from holding the phone to your ear for too long.
Oh, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
You get this sort of greasy smear on the screen, don't you?
The worst thing for us is for 9 months we've had no video conferencing for work. It's been magic. Now,
really? No.
Yeah, no, well, lots of reasons, but now we're starting to get it, and people are starting to use it. So no more sitting with my feet on the desk or in my pants, Now,
hang on a minute. I used to work with you, and I distinctly remember you having your feet on the desk in the office.
that's the office. But yeah, not my pants. I didn't normally
Thankfully,
have
no.
my pants on in the office.
Wait, you might want to rephrase that.
Hang on a minute. I've also just realised that this is a global audience. I am obviously talking about my scants or my grundies, if you will, depending on which part of the UK you are hailing from. Or underwear for the foreign listeners.
Sid has basically now admitted that in the office he wears no pants or underwear and has his feet on the desk. Wonderful. Whereas at home, he stepped it up and actually put something on.
I don't think I've heard the word grundies in ages.
It's a good one, though, isn't it? It's a good one. It's so descriptive. You all know what it means. It's those dodgy, soiled, yellow, white kind of pants.
Dude.
You know the ones.
The ones that make you look like you've got dysentery. Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Wonderful.
Right.
Oh, dear. Can we move on?
Right,
Yes.
We probably should, Steve. Sorry.
Right, it's all right. Let's quickly go through some news.
Yes.
So a couple of quick ones today. Of interest is that World of Darkness RPG has moved to Renegade, which I find really interesting because World of Darkness has jumped around like, well, a cat on a hot tin roof, I think, because it was originally its own thing. I can't remember the name. The name has completely escaped me of the company it used to be. White Wolf Games, sorry, that was it. Made the original World of Darkness games, of which Vampire the Masquerade is probably the most famous.
Mm-hmm.
But sometime a few years back, there was a plan to make a World of Darkness video game series. And they made a couple. They made a couple of vampire games.
Mm-hmm.
But it was bought out, I think, by the people who make EVE Online at one point. So they actually bought the role-playing game. Because role-playing games are usually just like, 5 guys in a shed kind of thing. But for everything that everyone that isn't Wizards of the Coast, these video game companies just said, we'll buy it. And apparently it's now owned by Paradox Interactive.
Right.
Who are licensing the rights to Renegade to make a new set of RPGs.
Interesting. What have Renegade done in the past? Remind me. The name is familiar to me.
So Renegade are the worldwide distributors and publishers of all of the West Kingdoms and North Sea games. All of the Garthill games, is it?
Yeah, Garthill games. Yeah.
Yeah, so there'll be 2 versions of those games available. There'll be the Garthill original and the Renegade one. So I think all the Kickstarter ones are Garthill and all the ones that you can purchase are Renegade. And apparently they're exactly the same game. It's just because they've been printed and distributed, they've got the Renegade logo on.
Right.
Renegade are also branching out more into RPG. So they did a Kickstarter this year for the Altered Carbon RPG.
Ooh.
And they did Kids on Bikes, which is the kind of other Stranger Things style.
Say not Stranger Things.
Not Stranger Things and not Tales from the Loop.
Right. Ooh.
But very similar. So yeah, Renegade seems to be branching out quite a bit into RPGs at the moment. It's interesting that they've taken World of Darkness because it's been a controversial game in the past. Because it's always been a bit edgy. It's all been a bit 90s edgy kind of thing, And there's been the choices in the writing of that game which have been questionable, shall we say.
Enlighten us. Give an example.
I'm not going to give an example. Well, linking things that the vampires are supposed to have done to abhorrent real-world events.
Oh, I see. Oh,
okay. I think Yugoslavian massacres in one book are linked to one group of vampires or something like that. Yeah, and it's kind of like, that's a bit edgy, but that's not actually very good taste, is it? So there's a few things like that have been in the past, and it'd be interesting to see if Renegade being a bit more clean of a distributor to get rid of, most likely we'll get rid of that and go through it with a fine-tooth comb so they don't end up with this.
Get rid of 4 of the 5 guys in the shed.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
So they're not quite sitting there smelling their own farts like the 4 guys in the shed have been doing, saying, this is awesome.
Is it?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, that can only be a good thing. I did like the vampire games, actually. I played Redemption and Bloodlines. They were pretty good. Well, I never actually finished Redemption. That was back in the 90s.
The 2 PC games?
Yes.
Was Redemption the one that was in the Source engine?
I don't know.
Or was that Bloodlines? Because I only played Bloodlines and I got so far, and then there was a fight in like a Chinese restaurant kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but my computer ran the entire game like butter. Although it was an older machine with an older graphics card, it ran fine until I get to that point, and then the game just ground to such like 1 frame per second kind of speed and made it completely unfinishable.
Yes, mine did exactly the same. Apparently there was a major bug with it. They did patch it and it eventually sorted it out, but yes, I had the same problem. As soon as you opened the door and there was water on the floor, the whole thing just shit the bed and it turned into a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, I remember that. Yes. No, the Bloodlines was a Source engine. Jesus. That must have been a very hacked version of the Source engine.
It was like the second or third game to use the Source engine.
Wow.
Because it was like Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike 0 or whatever, Counter-Strike Source, and then this, and then not much else actually used it, I don't think.
Team Fortress and a couple of other things didn't they?
Ah, there we go.
But it was all modded versions of the same thing, really, skinned up versions of Half-Life 2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know Bloodlines used Source. Interesting.
Because there's supposed to be Bloodlines 2 coming out soon as well, isn't there?
Is there?
And that's had a bit of controversy because the lead writer who'd been working on it for like about 2.5 years left about 6 months before it was about to be released, which was a bit weird. So, in other tabletop role-playing game news, Wizards of the Coast is being sued.
Again?
This isn't deja vu. This is a different lawsuit.
Oh.
And this relates to Gale Force 9.
We are aware of their work.
We were aware of that because you would have known of we'd be aware of board games because they did quite a few licensed board games. Well, they also do a load of products for D&D, such as spell cards, miniatures, and I didn't realise this, but they also translate the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition books into other languages.
Right.
So the lawsuit relates to them accusing Wizards of the Coast of breaking their contract. So the contract... Yeah, it's scarily similar to the other one, actually, the previous lawsuit we mentioned in the last episode, which was the Dragonlance one. Apparently, their contract was up for renewal up to the end of 2021, but apparently, Wizards of the Coast are not approving the new products in the line.
That sounds scarily similar again. Have they basically just put a big hold on anything that anyone else is ever doing?
Well, after me saying this theory the other week about, whether Dragonlance stuff was a bit, what's the word I'm looking for, like, not appropriate in this day and age, I did read someone say there's a new chap in charge of Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast, or was it at Hasbro, which own Wizards? And one of the theories is it's the new guy, so he's just, like, restarting everything. Oh. But it doesn't seem like he's doing it with a more delicate of touch, shall we say.
He's swinging the axe.
Yes.
New guys like to leave a mark, don't they? They've got to be seen to be worth their salary, I suppose, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all worked in the same company. Did you work on that project where the salesman did exactly that and nearly scuppered like one of the biggest projects for the company?
I'm aware of its work, yes.
So, without giving it any details, some manager came in and said, right, we're going to cut the cost of this by 20%, so told all suppliers you need to charge 20% less for these items. And apparently one item was a highly technological piece of kit. One item was so advanced it was made like basically in a guy's shed somewhere in the arse end of nowhere, because he was like the master of this. It was like, proper jeweler's kind of equipment to get the detail. And apparently they all had to wine and dine him because he went, well, I'm not charging 20% less, you can bugger off. That's my prices, take it or leave them.
Nice.
They all had to go there and quite literally grovel, apparently. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, they weren't well known for their tact and their subtlety, are they?
No, they were not.
Oh, you still work there, Sid?
Yeah, I never got out. You lot dug your tunnels and me off.
Yeah.
poured concrete in the back and just left me there to hold up. I'm there with the light switch in hand. That's me, man.
Well, they do say, you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun someone else.
You just got to be faster than the other guy, that's right.
You've just got to be faster than Sid.
Yep.
And you all won. You've all won.
And have we looked back? Nope. Well, that'll be interesting to see how that happens. I wonder if there's going to be like a restart. There's a big red button sat at Wizards of the Coast that just says all contracts now back on, and they're going to smack it sometime in 2021.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's got that kind of ring to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's a funny old time, though, isn't it, with Corona and stuff like that. Folk are just not sure what the hell's going on, but people like Wizards should be sat there raking it in right now. And I don't understand. I mean, maybe all the stopping stuff is planning or moving it around so it falls into different financial years. Just a bit of a slowdown in the system. Maybe it was too much too quick and they don't want to expose themselves to too much liability. It does seem a bit weird.
Speaking of raking it in at Wizards, we're all expecting Tasha's at some point. Myself in the next 24 hours. I'm sure yours will be on the way as well. But didn't we wager that this is probably going to be the biggest selling book, D&D book of all time? Because wasn't
Xanathar's was the biggest and fastest selling book. It was sold like the most amount in the shortest amount of time or something like that. But I saw something a few weeks back that's saying based on pre-orders alone, it was top of the Amazon book selling list in like 4 categories.
Jesus.
Yeah, so if you look at the best selling books on Amazon, it's like it's been at the number one for weeks.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, we'll get on to 5e because we've got some questions later, and I think 5e is going to get mentioned quite a bit there. And I think you cannot under anticipate just how big Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is.
Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes back to a discussion we had a few podcasts ago about the new edition. It's doing so well that I just don't think they should or could create a new edition now, because everyone will just be, what? We haven't played all the new stuff yet.
Yeah. Unless it went for like a 5.5.
Yeah.
I think a 5.5 is needed, but then I've got my issues with 5. You know that.
Yeah.
But no, in seriousness, whilst I do say that in jest, I think 5 is a good system in general. I think it has its problems, but then anything's going to have its problems. There's always going to be things you don't like about it. But a little bit of a corner knocking off here and there and a bit of refinement in a 5.5 would be, I think, a good thing.
Right.
Yes.
Let's move on from some lore to some games.
And we are lucky that we played so many games a few weeks back. We've actually got a backlog to talk about. So we can talk about games even though lockdown happened.
Hurrah! Yes. Yeah, so everything we're about to talk about happened as we're recording it about a month ago. So we're not breaking any rules here. At least not legal ones.
No. So, unfortunately as well, we've only really played like 1 or 2 games of each of these. I mean, you've played several games of The Godfather, have you? Or it's just 1 or 2, Andy?
No, I've played it, 4, 5, 6 times now.
Well, since you're the voice of experience, why don't you tell us about The Godfather?
The Godfather. I'm assuming you mean the board game, not the film or the book.
Indeed.
Well, The Godfather by Simon, actually, or Kumon, however you want to pronounce it, and designer, I think it's Eric Lang, isn't it?
It is an Eric Lang game, yes.
I know, much to my surprise. I'm not usually a big fan of his, although I did enjoy Blood Rage, and to let a cat out of a bag, I quite enjoyed The Godfather too. But The Godfather, obviously based on the book and the film, you play as one of the many crime families in New York, vying for control of all of its territories, and you have members of your family that you can put onto the game. So the game is a bit of a kind of a worker placement, area control, hand management-y type game, with a bit of secret information chucked in as well. Ultimately, the goal of the game is to have the most money at the end of the game, and you get that by acquiring it mostly by doing jobs. So that's, drive-by shootings, robberies, moving in on somebody else's turf, that kind of idea. It's all very thematic. You don't actually do any of the jobs, per se as an action in the game. It's literally just, I'm going to do this job, pay some resources, and the job gets done. But you have this wonderful mechanic in the game with your briefcase, or your suitcase, where you can only score at the end of the game where you put money in your suitcase. You can have as much money in your hand as you like. But if you don't have any money in your suitcase in the game, you're not going to do very well. So the whole point of the game is that you go to locations around the map, which have front and back, and you either hold them up or do dodgy deals in the background. And at the end of each round, the person who's got basically the most people in one of the areas controls that area, which then gets you a benefit. So there's a lot of toing and froing going on. It's very much a competitive game, so you can do a job on someone else, shoot all of the members of their family, throw them in the Hudson, and off they go, which Steve was a big victim of.
Yep. I think there was one round of the game where every single member of my family was currently sleeping with the fishes.
That was quite satisfying. And it wasn't me that did it.
It wasn't you, and it wasn't vindictive either. It was just one of those things where, due to the location of where I had people on the board, it was obviously the most optimum move for that person to make. Because it was a car bomb, wasn't it? Was it car bomb?
Yeah, it was a car bomb.
And it was like, if I go here, I'll get 3 people. If I go here, I'll get 5, but they're all Steves. But getting rid of 5 is better than getting rid of 3, so sorry, Steve.
Yeah, unlucky. Sorry, not sorry. But so it's a very tight game. Very straightforward mechanics. There's 2 types of family member as well. So you've got literal family members. You've also got basically thugs. And they can only go on certain types of space, whereas the family members can go on other types of space. And it's trying to find the balance between these 2 types of actions, basically, to give you the best way forward. And of course, during the game, you can hire what we call allies, basically bribe them, people like the police commissioner or the lord or the mayor, basically get them in your pocket. And they can perform specific actions as well. So through the 4 acts of the game, you get more and more power. And ultimately, the person at the end of the game with basically the most territory and the most cash wins the game.
I really like this.
Yeah.
I mean, we already know that I'm a big Eric Lang fan, so it was not really going to be a surprise, but I thought it was really clever. The cash, putting the cash into the briefcase was a thing as well, because you had to take an action to do that.
Mm.
And there were points in the game where it's like, well, I've accumulated some cash, but it in my hand is useless, so I need to get into this briefcase as quickly as possible, but that requires spending actions where you could have got more cash. So as that really, really, really good kind of trade-off between using an action to keep your points and using an action to score more points.
Yes.
And there was also that risk, wasn't there? Because one of the jobs allowed you to, or one of the characters, I can't remember which one it was, allowed you to steal something out of someone else's briefcase.
That was one of the jobs.
Was one of the jobs, was it? Yeah.
So it's either muscle in or muscle out, something like that. Or it's extortion. I think it's called extortion. So basically, you can physically steal something, or rather, you basically say, "I'm give me one of your monies from your briefcase." If they've got any sense, they'll have a bunch of ones in there, so they give you very little. But if they haven't planned ahead, and they've got a big fat fiver sat in there, then unlucky, and you get their money. So it's up to them to give you what they want to give you. But obviously, timing and keeping a track of what opponents have put into their briefcase is part of the skill. So whenever you put something in, obviously you've got to show everybody what you're putting in, so they have a reasonable idea of what you've got there.
I did have one criticism of the game, though, which was very much, for me, luck dependent on what jobs came out of the deck.
Yes.
So we played a 4-player game, and I was quite surprised when later on in the game you were playing, you and Alora were playing these jobs, which I'd never seen. Because they just hadn't come up in the deck or hadn't come up on the spread. And it felt horribly limiting at that point, because I thought, well, how come they're able to steal stuff from my briefcase? I've never even seen that card. Never mind, had the resources ready to do it or managed to accumulate those resources. I'm basically getting the same 3 or 4 jobs all the way through, when I think there was 6 or 8 jobs to choose from. So it was a little bit luck dependent there, but at the same time, you knew what you had in your hands, so you could work towards what you had in hand. It felt like I didn't have as many interesting things to do as everyone else.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're all also those public jobs as well. Admittedly, once they've gone until the next round, but there is a bit more. But yes, you're right. I mean, if you've been working towards one particular job that's in your hand and, nothing else comes out and you've got a handful of cash, then that's not helpful. But then you just go on the offensive. Start just taking workers' parts and go, no, they're all mine.
True.
So, yeah, it's a very tight game, a very clever game. Scales well as well, between sort of 2, 3, 4, and 5 players. So the number of action spaces grows throughout the game. Starts off with fewer of them in a 2-player game as it does compared to a 5-player game. So that's the real difference there, is essentially the availability of spots, and also placement spots as well. They change throughout the player count as well. And usually, when you place a family member on one of the round spots, they occupy more than one territory. So then there's this sort of not only putting your worker onto a placement spot that gets you the right stuff, but also putting it somewhere that can get you some territory control as well. And finding that balance is very clever. But yes, I really like it. I was very surprised by it, very pleasantly surprised. I'd heard good things about it, but it wasn't what I expected, I have to admit, when I played it.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I've heard a few people say it's a worker placement game, but it doesn't feel like a worker placement game to me.
No, I know what you mean. It is a worker placement, but it's very limited in its worker placement scope.
Yeah. It's weird. It feels more like area control than worker placement. Although, admittedly, you're putting a token down, which gets you something. But that then controls some of the area as well. So it's almost like as if you've blended that area control and worker placement together at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's actually really clever design. It actually feels quite thematic as well, because it's not... As I said, the only really random thing in it is that draw when you actually draw some cards at the beginning of every round. The rest of the time is completely Eurogame-esque, but it's got a really strong theme as well, which is almost like a disparity there.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I don't think you could reskin it particularly easily into something else, which is obviously what a lot of Euro games suffer from. You could just Terraforming Scotland, you could just reskin into whatever you wanted, and then the mechanics would be exactly the same, for example. But there are plenty of other games that suffer that as well. I mean, hell, some of the West Kingdom games you could argue that do the same. Raiders of the North Sea. In fact, it has been, because it's Raiders of Scythia, isn't it? Basically the same game, just in a different coat.
At least that's still raiding, though.
It is, yes. I mean,
there's a similarity on that one.
I was having the argument with Laura the other day about the difference between reskinning and not having the same game. And I said, yeah, you could do Raiders of the North Sea. You could probably do Tramps in Yorkshire or something like that. Raiding the booze shop, something like that. It'd be exactly the same game. It's just the paint would be different. So yeah, The Godfather, pretty good game, definitely recommended. The miniatures are in there, obviously seem on a very high quality and they're very detailed. To be honest, you could get away with tokens. They are purely vestigial and don't actually represent very much. But it is Simon, they make miniatures, so... but this is not a Dudes on the Map game by Simon. Well, it is, but...
It is. So another game we've managed to play, although not a lot. I mean, we managed to get 2 or 3 games in this the other day, which was also a learning game, which is Arkham Horror: The Final Hour. Now, what this is it's supposed to be a quick version of Arkham Horror. So Arkham Horror is the big, Cthulhu is going to destroy the world. You need to go around Arkham, closing all the gates. And what Final Hour is supposed to be, it's supposed to be the later stages of the game. So the big Gribble is about to come out, and the last stage of closing the gate. And it's set, I think, in the university. So it's at Miskatonic University. And it's a really, really simple game, because what you're basically trying to do is collect tokens which will let you guess what the gate is at the end. And I say guess because it's the interesting thing. It's not about collecting tokens, which, you collect X tokens, you close the gate, job's done. What you do is you're trying to collect these tokens which give you clues as to which symbol it isn't. At the final round of the game, you kind of make a bid to close the gate, which is based on the cards in your hand. Say, right, I think it's going to be like these symbols. And if you get it right, you close it. But if you get it wrong, game over, you've all lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting about this game is how it actually plays, because you have some cards in your hand, and it has 2 actions on each card, a top action and a bottom action. And each card's got a number on it, which is the initiative. Now, if you've played Gloomhaven, this may be sounding a little bit familiar. But, especially in higher player count games, which is where the game gets more interesting, you don't choose whether it's the top or bottom of the card that gets played. That gets determined about the order in which the initiative of these cards occurs. So me, Andy and Sid here could all play a card each. And generally, it's like the first half of the card is good, and the second half of the card is both good and bad at the same time. So you generally want the good half of the cards being played, but each one has a number, and you go up in in sequential order. So Andy may have played the card which he thought was good, thinking, 21, that's middle of the deck, that'll be fine. But me and Sid have played like a 5 and a 6. So instead of playing the good half of the card, we end up playing the half of the card which Andy thought, no, we'll never play that, that's really bad and that'll scupper us. Now, this concept had a very mixed reaction from our group of players. I loved it.
that is putting it mildly, yes.
I was going, this is amazing, because I thought this was so clever.
The spectrum of reaction ranged from absolute delight to complete and utter revulsion. That's what basically it did. And I was kind of sort of sat kind of on Steve's side of middle, if that makes sense. I think because there was you and me and Alora and Adam, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And I think Alora was on sort of Adam's side of centre, Adam being the farthest from liking it. And yeah, obviously you really, really enjoying it. I can see why you enjoyed it. A, because I know you, and B, because it is quite a clever game. It's not, I mean, it only takes about 15 minutes, it should be said. It is a really quick game, mostly because it's so bloody hard and you'll die. You just, you end up getting finished off really, really quickly. So it's almost the opposite of Arkham Horror. That takes 15 days to finish Arkham Horror 2 with all of its expansions. with all of these mechanics together, it does form a very clever system of events that you actually have to think about, because you've got to work out where things can go on the map and what cards you're potentially going to end up at the end of the game. Because if you don't have the right symbols on the cards that you have at the end of the game, your guess is basically scuppered as well. Because essentially there's basically about 6 or 7 different types of symbol, and you essentially, by tweaking these tokens, you can eliminate the possibilities at the end of the game. So you want as many of them as you can to make your guess a bit easier. But getting them obviously is very hard, because you've got to battle Gribblies and paths get closed and it restricts your movement and so on and so forth. But again, it's only about a 20-minute game. It's not the marathon that is the standard Arkham Horror. But I did enjoy it.
It was quite fascinating, Adam's reaction, because I think Adam absolutely hated it. Yeah, I think we'd barely finished the first game and he'd already had enough of it. And it was like, well, come on, let's give it another try. It's a 15-minute game. Let's give it another try. We really had to convince him to play a second game of it.
Yeah, he really didn't like it.
He'd already made his mind up by then as well. So it did not go down well with him.
Yeah. I think I was more on his camp at the end of the first game, but obviously more willing to give it a go because I could see its potential. The reason I think I didn't like it to start with, and Adam obviously didn't like it, is because it does appear on the face of it that there's very little control over it. It's extremely luck-based until you think about it.
Yes, it felt like it can feel like things are out of your control because you need to anticipate what you think other people are going to play to get the most out of your card. So yeah, you can feel sometimes like you're playing the worst card every single time, and it gets to the point where it's just damage limitation. You're not playing the card because, well, that's I'm hoping for the best bit. You're like, well, let's play this card because if we do get the bad half of the card, that's not too bad in our current situation.
It is. It's almost what is the least worst card I can play. And if I get the good bit, bonus. So yeah, it's got a combination. There is a little bit of luck in it, obviously, because the cards you draw and stuff obviously beyond your control. But then it's got that lovely part of the game that I do quite like is, right, here is a shit situation, deal with it.
Yeah.
And try and make a sensible decision out of it. So yeah, it's an interesting twist on Arkham. I think I still prefer Arkham Horror, full fat. But for a 15 to 20 minute blast, final hour was pretty good.
Yeah. As I said, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I need to play it some more. I do need to play it some more because we only played like 2 or 3 games of it. But as you said, with the 15-minute play, it was you can play a game, lose, and within seconds you've set back up again and you're going again, kind of thing, which is one of the beauties of it. It just, as you said, it does feel like the low-fat option. Yeah. Because full Arkham Horror, you're looking at 4 hours easily for a full Arkham Horror game.
With a player count of 4, yeah, sure. It's
Excuse me, Siri just tried to translate Arkham Horror into Swedish.
Yeah, I can imagine, because Laura and I have been playing Arkham Horror 3rd edition quite a lot recently. We're getting quite good at it, actually. But that's a 2-player count, and that still takes us, 2.5 hours with 2 players. So with 4, 5, or 6, I can imagine that's a bit of a slog.
So yeah, that's final hour. Your tastes may vary. I personally think it's a clever design, but it can feel very frustrating.
Yeah.
Right then. So one of the big games we've been playing a lot of recently is Alien, Destroyer of Worlds, from Free League or Free League. And I'm going to cut to the chase, Steve.
Yep.
Fucking amazing.
Right, next.
That's exactly what Andy said.
We can fill in the gaps if you want, but frankly, for me, it's best game of the year. Absolutely brilliant.
Really?
Yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
We've talked about the system before. I can't remember if you must have been in that chat when we talked about it.
No,
previously.
it wasn't. It was before. And interestingly enough, you basically introduced it in exactly the same way.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's brilliant. It's an absolutely spectacular system. But the Destroyer of Worlds is more because the last time we played
Chariots of the Gods.
Chariot of the Gods. That's the one. Thank you. I knew it was something to do with wheels. Whereas the Destroyer of Worlds is Chariot of the Gods was kind of a 4-session-ish.
Well, they're both they're both supposed to be roughly the same amount of time. So what these are cinematic scenarios. So what Alien says is it gives you all the rules for a big campaign, which is like your more traditional role-playing game where you create characters and you develop them, you level up between games, getting new skills. But it also introduces this concept of the cinematic scenario where it tries to replicate an Aliens movie in one scenario. So you get given characters, and all these characters are, let's say, rough around the edges, in which case they've all got their own agendas and things they want to do. And the game plays out in 3 acts like a normal film would, and the idea is that you take those characters through those 3 acts, and the game will also supply you with a plethora of backup characters because your main characters will die. They're a little bit flexible, but they say they should take... It's suggested, actually, it should take 3 sessions, but they suggest like sessions should be about 5 hours each kind of thing.
Yeah. We're probably about
right
then.
1 act per session. So we're not. I don't think we're far off. We played through Chariot of Gods, I think, a bit quicker, because I think it is a little bit of a shorter scenario in scope, but also because you didn't do the things at the end, which wanted me to introduce extra stuff. But there was basically an extra encounter I could have had at the end, but you'd already got to a point where you killed each other, so it didn't matter. Yeah. The inter-party events had got to that point, whereas Destroyer of Worlds is much clearer 3 acts, and I think there's a lot more room to breathe.
Well, it's far more expansive. I didn't feel with Chariots of the Gods, it was... I'm not sure how much we can say, but it's quite a confined environment, really. You couldn't really go outside and wander off track, whereas in Destroyer of Worlds, it felt a bit more open. It felt like we could go kind of shopping and rob random bits of equipment if we chose to do it for half an hour of that session, which we did, of course. But it was far more expansive, and it was far more detailed. There was more locations to go to. There was more people to interact with. It felt like there was a lot more cheeky little side quests we could have done. I still feel like if we played that again, it would be a completely different experience. Whereas with Chariots of the Gods, I'm not so sure. I think Chariots of the Gods would almost play out very similarly. You've got the variable of the party and things like that, but you wouldn't get random encounters and different playthroughs with it.
Yeah, different panic rolls, different amounts of stress, all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
it was definitely a lot more openly written. It felt a bit more sandboxy. I think sandbox is the word they use. Chariot of the Gods felt like a traditional video game. In fact, it felt like Alien Isolation in many ways.
Yeah.
You had a limited area which you could go to, whereas right at the very beginning of Destroyer of Worlds, you're basically given a car and a city to drive around. So it feels a bit like GTA in that regard.
Yeah.
You can go straight for the objective, or you can like poke off down the bar or whatever. To give a little background, so we don't want to try and spoil this here. We're going to try and not reveal any spoilers, and we might do like a spoiler-filled chat later. What the basic scenario is that the group here are Charlie Squad, so they're, USSMC, I can never get it right, Marine Corps, which is what you get in the Aliens films, and you've all been tooled up and you've got to hunt for some AWOLs on this frozen moon planet, which is also an oil refinery. And I'm not going to say any more than that because that's all I can say. But I actually think the story of this would make a better movie than some of the actual Alien movies.
Definitely, yes.
It really would. But I think the reason I kind of like Destroyer of Worlds actually is because you had the Marine Corps in there, and you had more variety of, not protagonists, but you had more people to interact with. Chariots of the Gods, we only had ourselves really, plus stuff.
Chariot of the Gods felt like a dungeon crawler.
It did, yeah.
Just in the Aliens universe.
Whereas this, with Destroyer of Worlds, I felt like we were able to investigate a bit more. There was a bit of digging to do, a bit of interrogating to do, a bit of, I say interrogating loosely, boots on people's necks in our case, but modern diplomacy at its finest. It wasn't, and it didn't feel quite as railroady as Chariots in some ways, because there was whole areas of map I'm convinced we never went to. For example, one of the, there's sub levels that we never went to in that building, where it was whole sections that we have no idea what's there even now, having played it. Yep. And that's why I think true. from an expansiveness of the game, I think it's far more impressive. And yeah, it's a beautiful game. It's brilliant. It was value for money, Steve, if I'm honest, because we had 2.5 hour sessions that took me 4 hours to wind down from. Right?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that was probably our only mistake. Playing it so we finished at 10 o'clock, man, I didn't go to bed till 2 or 3 the next morning, just because I needed that time to kind of, I almost had to do hot yoga or something to kind of relax afterwards. I was absolutely buzzing at the end of every session. I haven't had that feeling from an RPG or from any game actually in a long time.
It is all very tense. But I mean, that does stem from the fact that you are squishy. Everything is very heightened and everything is very, very stressful, deliberately. One thing I did notice about this compared to Chariot of the Gods was the agendas that characters have. And obviously we can't mention what they are, but I will say that they felt less immediate.
They weren't as drastic either.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So one of the things about Chariot of the Gods almost feels like a cooking pot in that you throw in everyone into this cooking pot, like frog in the saucepan kind of thing. The whole thing about Chariot of the Gods was a lot of what made that one interesting is you put all these characters in a stressful situation, what made them do all these things which were like against the good of the group. Whereas I felt like the ones from Destroyer of Worlds were more like we're a team and we've got to pull together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. It was far more cooperative in terms of the agenda. They weren't there to screw the group over, whereas the ones in Church of the God did feel a bit more aggressive, adversarial.
Yeah. Which made for a very different style of game in the same rule system.
And it worked. I mean, the rule system we've talked about before, but it's very flexible, very lightweight, and very flowing. It makes sense. A lot of all the dice rolls make sense. All the decisions make sense, and it all comes together very, very easily within the confines of the game, which was nice. And presumably, it makes it a lot easier to manage as well from the DM's point of view.
It is. There's some aspects of it which are a little bit finicky. The aliens themselves, the xenomorphs, are a bit of a faff. Because they work, you can basically have non-alien adversaries, which are basically humans, and humans are really easy to work out. They've got some basic stats. But the aliens have all got special attacks and special ways in which they die. And it's basically, you've got 2 tables you've got to look up every time you have an alien. Well, 3 tables. You've got to look at its stats, its attack table, and its death table. Ugh. Which can be a bit faffy in like the heat of the moment when it's like, okay, did he die or is he just faking it? He's faking it, okay.
But of course we don't know that until we poke the corpse.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And another one, which is, this is a really weird criticism I have of it. So the system works by you having, and anyone who's played any of like Free League's Year Zero based systems will know this. You have like core attributes and then skills. So your core attributes like strength, mobility, agility, that kind of thing. And then you have your skills on top, which is close combat, range combat, and that kind of thing. The stats for the NPCs within the rulebook were put in that exact same format, which was a bit of a faff when it came to just like, you were facing against the enemies with guns at one point. I'm about to say what they were, but I thought let's leave that. Enemy combatants, let's call them. So every time I looked it up, I had to look up what his mobility skill was, what the range combat skill was, and what the bonus was for the weapon they were using.
Yeah.
And every single time I kind of had already forgotten what it was previously, and had to do that little bit of mental arithmetic in my head just to see how many dice I rolled for him. Well, it could have just, it's such a minor complaint, but it could have done with just with formatting of like this attack, this many dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good.
That's a minor complaint. I think I had 2 complaints about the entire thing, and that was one of them.
Yeah. No, it was good. It's very well thought out. It works really well. I can imagine it can be scaled up or down as well. I mean, we've done 2 now in very different environments, as we've said. So I would be very interested to see a campaign of this. Although in a campaign, I'd imagine I would go through characters like shit through a goose. So that would be.
Well, this was the amazing thing. I mean, we went through characters, but the threat thing I think is really interesting. Is it's okay to lose a character. I mean, all right, I was emotionally distraught about Gunny, right? I'm still struggling, right? I still lie awake at night just wondering what she could have been. But, that how quickly you form that bond with the pre-gen, I thought was amazing, because it let you get into the game really quickly. You know, with simple, accessible characters, you could kind of relate to them. I felt that they've thought about the pre-gens quite a lot, and they thought about, they gave you enough hooks to kind of get into the skin of that character. So that even when I lost my first character, picked up my second character, it was quite a quick transition. And you know, Andy, you've had similar experience with losing characters, and a couple of others in our group did as well. And I thought everybody just got going with a new character really quickly.
Yes.
So it's just
and you never felt that any of the pre-gens were crap either.
No
one seemed to be unhappy with their pre-gens, because that's happened in other games where someone's, you know, coming to me after another session, going, can I change the character because this one's a bit rubbish, I don't like this one. But it felt like everyone had got into their character quite quickly with this, and really, I mean, I think they were quite relatively simple.
Well, I think that's
helped.
the beauty of it, is the characters are simple, but also the equipment is simple. You know, you've got big guns, little guns, medium guns, and fire. That's it. And combinations thereof. Now,
and RPGs that don't explode.
You know, the RPGs that don't have blast damage. Oh, amazing those are. But yeah, that's all right. There's one criticism maybe. But no, I think you're right. I think the simplicity of those pre-gens allows you to make them a bit what you want. And I think that was very, very well done, actually.
I think the pace of the game helps as well, because you don't have time to either A, mourn, or B, dally to get to know
it's
your
time
new
to
character
mourn.
as well.
I'm still mourning the gunny. I think I mentioned it every single session.
Yes, yes, you did. But the pace of the game means you have to get on with it. You know, here is your new character sheet. It's simple, so you can pick it up, but you've just got to get on with it, because it's not like, you know, D&D or any other, you know, slower paced game where you've got time to faff about and tweak things and mess around. And no, just here's your character, get your boots on, get on with it. Yeah. Because down that tunnel is a xenomorph, and we're gonna die.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also quite clever how, I think I got the impression, Steve, that you had quite a lot of tools at your disposal to accelerate us along or slow us down or put blockers in the way and things like that.
So from a GM's point of view, what these cinematic scenarios do is they break it down to 3 acts, and they'll have a major event which separates the acts. And then what it does is it gives you a list of events. So you've got your usual kind of role-playing game thing where you can go explore. You know, you can go to X, you can go to Y. But then I've got this big list of things I can just randomly throw at you. And most of them have not got a location. It's not like, oh, you'll meet the crazy religious guy outside the bar. It just says, you'll meet a crazy religious guy. And so I get the opportunity of when to throw them in, which means, as you said, if I feel if the pace is going a little bit slow, I can throw in an attack, you know, to fruit things up a bit. And they don't feel like random encounters either. They all felt like they were meant to be there, and they all actually progressed the story a little bit. And interestingly enough, I barely used any in the final act, because what you were doing was moving the story fast enough forward that I didn't feel I didn't need to. I didn't need to chivvy you on at any point. I think I used one at one point just to really ramp things up, to try and get you, you know, because you were thinking about moving anyway, but it was just like this extra notch cranker that went, right, okay, now we know we're going to have to go do X, Y, Z, so off you went, you know, rather than sitting there trying to, you know, think about it, overthink it. And I really, really like that way of doing these adventures. I've never seen this in another system, and they may exist, but I've not seen them, and I really like it because it gives you that flexibility of characters can play around and explore like a dungeon crawler, but at the same time, these things can be used just to keep, you know, mixing it up and keeping it moving.
I think from a player's perspective, I think it was excellent because it allows you to control the game better, and it forced, like you said, we were dithering and dallying. We could have talked about it for 4 days if you'd left us, possibly. We might not have done, but the fact that you can choose to, I'll just give them a kick up the arse because they're dithering and I want to see what happens next. I think that's a really powerful mechanic.
The only problem I've got with it, I don't know when the next one's coming out.
No, well, there's not enough of it. That's the problem. Yeah, we've used it all. Give me more.
As I say, if you want to just reset next week, let's go for it. Let's just start and go through it again. You know, this time maybe Gunny will get to the end, and I can set my mind at ease that she was the perfect character for that game.
Well, interestingly enough, some other people have mentioned this, so I may be running all these again anyway at some point, and it's going to be fascinating to run them with a different group of people, just to see what they do differently and how things change. I think they could end up with completely drastically different results with this.
And absolutely, and I think that's kind of the key for me with this. With the not so much with Destroyer Worlds, but Chariots of the Gods, because of the way that plays out. It could be such a different experience depending on how the cards fall at the start of that one. If you see what I mean, I can't say much because I'm trying to keep it spoiler free. But whereas on this with Alien the Destroyer Worlds, I think it's more about the order in which you might do things might be different, which will give you a different feel for how the game plays out and things like that, and the route you take to get to the end will be different. Whereas I think in Chariots, how the team develops or doesn't, as it turns out, and it will be far more interesting. I think they're two very different games, and I think you play them both, play them all as far as you can, play as many of these games as you possibly can. You will enjoy it. You will thank us all for it. They're just magnificent. I mean, I suppose we can touch on Hadley's Hope a little bit as well, which is the kind of the starter set.
There's two products. If you want to play the game, there's basically two products. There is a campaign. There's the rule book, which is a big, thick, heavy hardback tome, which is your typical RPG rule book, which includes all the rules. So it's got all the rules for the cinematic play, which is what we've been doing, and the basic mechanics. It's got all the rules for character advancement and character creation for doing the campaign. It's got loads of rules for different types of xenomorphs, and I've pulled in from some fascinating places. And then there's like a massive, about I think half the book easily is just fluff, just explaining all the factions, explaining all the planets you can go to, and all the different places and the tensions. And it's a really good resource for doing the campaign. But what they've also done is they've introduced a starter box, which comes with dice, and the Chariots of the Gods is bundled with it. So you get you get a slimmed down rule book, which I think is brilliant. You get tokens which you can use on maps, because it gives you a fold out maps to play in the middle of the table as well, and tokens you can put down. It gives you the dice, which are awesome. It gives you the cards, which you've got cards for all the weapons and the initiative. But also, as I said, it comes with Chariots of the Gods as it is. And then Destroyer of Worlds is its own box set as well, which also comes with maps and cards as well. So, I mean, we've only played the cinematic games, so if that's what you're interested in, I would highly recommend getting the starter set and then Destroyer of Worlds, which covers you. But that rulebook is a thing of beauty anyway.
Yeah.
There's so much information in there. I mean, we've got other games to play, which is, I'm kind of reluctant to play some of these at the moment because I kind of want to run an Alien campaign now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to write that myself, which I'm still not 100% confident about writing my own stuff for RPGs. So,
yes, you have to make a coherent narrative now, Steve. That's hard.
Yes,
that
exactly.
Is hard. Writing
You've got a beginning, a middle, and an end, Steve. That's the key points.
Well, interestingly, you say that. We're going to, speaking on the Free League thing, we're going to start playing Forbidden Lands soon. So I've been prepping all that, and I've got the campaign book for Forbidden Lands called Raven's Purge. It's interesting because there's no beginning or middle. There's only an end.
Wait, what?
Oh.
It's fascinating because it never doesn't say this is how you should start. It doesn't say you need to do X, Y, and Z. It just goes, when you feel it's ready, here's the final encounter.
It's a bit of a your own, isn't it, Forbidden Lands?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Forbidden Lands it can be the complete opposite to Alien. It's going to be so much more. I'm not going to say it's going to be less deadly, but it's going to be a little bit more relaxed in pace, shall we say. Hopefully you'll be able to sleep shortly after you've played.
Oh, good.
I could do with that, Steve.
Have a drink and smoke.
So yeah, Alien, I'm buying everything that comes out for that game.
Yeah, I will be doing
I'm
the
playing
same.
everything you're going to GM for us on that game, frankly, because it's absolutely magnificent.
I really want to get, whilst on the subject of Free League, I really want to start getting the Tales from the Loop stuff, because that looks really cool, and I like the idea of it. But we shall see, because last time I went to the Free League website, I put a lot in my shopping basket. I didn't click go, but I'm sure I will do at some point in the future.
You say that, but I and ahed about getting the starter set and Destroyer of Worlds, because I didn't need the starter set, right? Because I had the rule book.
They have all
but
the
I like the
groovy
idea
stuff.
of this. but I didn't have the dice, and I liked the idea of it. And I ummed and ahed, and I did exactly that. I did my shopping basket, I took it off, kept defaulting to Krona, so I had no idea how much it was actually bloody costing.
Yep.
Delete it, start again. And then one day I just looked at it and went, sod it! Bye.
Yes.
There's nothing like a bad day for a bit of retail therapy and pushing that buy button, is there?
Exactly.
Oh.
That's how I ended up with a PlayStation 3. That's what happened when I bought my PlayStation 4. Just bad days. That's all it was.
Bad days, yeah, well.
Just bad days.
I hope I don't have too many bad days in future because I've just bought Arkham Horror Living Card Game, and that is a very deep hole I'm going to fall down. There are, 6 cycles for that now? Each cycle has 7 items. It's like, oh, God.
We'll get on to that later, possibly. So, yes, that was Alien. We love it. We'll be playing some other Free League stuff soon, so we'll see how that compares. But if it's anything even close to Alien, I think they may be our new favourite RPG publisher.
Definitely, yes.
Right, we have got a bulging mail sack, boys.
Really? In this day and age?
Where to start?
We must not be using Yodel or something, must we? It must be Royal Mail that's actually bringing our post.
Well, it is. It did find it in the recycle bin, on bin day.
We do have a lot of questions. Where to start, boys? Where to start?
At the middle, just for a laugh.
In the middle?
Yeah, just pick one randomly. Each person picks a question they want answered. There we go. We'll keep going until we run out of time.
Right, well, there's a few easy ones we can ease ourselves into.
Go on then.
Number 1.
An old pair of slippers.
Top of the list. When are we going to hear more from John Cage? Is he dead? We miss him. Oh, we don't. Aww. Next.
I especially like who it's from. Someone at Definitely Not John. Is it actually John? This is what I must now ask myself.
Is it John?
Well, I didn't copy and paste this into the show notes. Andy probably didn't copy and paste this in.
Oh, hang on.
So I'm guessing John has got his little mitts onto the Google Doc because he's still got access.
Oh, quite possibly, yes. When are we going to hear from him? Well, when he finds some time and, books his ideas up about, being a father and stuff, he's welcome back. Until then, pull your thumb out your arse, Cage, play some games, and you'll be welcome back. Now,
he has put pictures. He has received both Etherfields and Tainted Grail this last few weeks. So, I think we might be inviting ourselves over because I really fancy playing both of those games.
We'll sit there playing it, Steve, while he looks after Sam.
Yes. Perfect arrangement.
Exactly. Assuming we're allowed over and it's not lockdown.
We have Millie has asked, Lockdown Gaming, what were the surprises? Good and bad? ?
Well, I think we've covered the RPG side of these things in previous casts. And this one, in fact, Alien, obviously.
Yeah, fully support that as a good. That's definitely the good.
We weren't a fan of Heart, so that's covering the bad. But in terms of actual board gaming, it's been difficult because obviously getting together has been very difficult, even more so than normal. Because, despite the fact that we podcast every 2 or 3 weeks together, we don't actually physically see each other in person very often at all, which is, of course, very difficult to actually play some games. Now, Steve came over, or I went over to his actually about a month or so ago, which is where we got some of these games done. And you came over to mine.
Yeah, I visited yours the last time, but it was like the day Bojo made his next announcement of lockdown. So I think I came to yours Saturday morning. We played some games. I got home, and then
that was it.
Bojo was telling everyone, "Nope, you're locked down now.
You're not allowed."
So yeah. So we managed to squeeze in like 3 games that day because we were like, "Come on, we got to get some content. Yep. Come on."
Most of which we've actually already covered. So there was Lost Ruins of Arnak. We enjoyed. I have to say, I really enjoyed. What's that one that Mr. Grogan took us through?
Agamonia.
Agamonia. That's the
one. Yeah,
I
thought that was really good actually. I thought it was really good.
Which was only obviously an intro and a demo of it because it's not out yet, but that was very good.
So kind of taking this a bit more abstract, lockdown gaming, I've got more to grips with Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia.
Yep.
I've been introduced to Board Game Arena, which is some really simple games you can play online. In fact, when lockdown first started, you couldn't even log into Board Game Arena. Servers crashed under the amount of people trying to get on there. But that's really clever because it's web-based and it's not 3D-based.
Yes.
So it's much simpler to just explain and take people through because although I love Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator for their ability to look like a real game, sometimes the interface can be a bit clunky and you need half decent 3D graphics on your machine. But I think Polygon Arena allows you basically to do it on a test, calculator, basically, because it's such a simple website. Bad. I really, really am sad that we didn't have UK Games Expo this year.
Yeah.
Expo is my gaming highlight of the year, and I'm going to be honest, it's also kind of our podcast highlight because it's actually the 2 episodes we do, the preview episode and the episode we do straight after, so the wash up, are always our 2 biggest episodes of the year.
Yes.
And it feels like we haven't had that big event this year, and I missed seeing everyone. I missed seeing all the exciting games. This one thing that has happened during lockdown, we've been introduced to and playing a lot more different RPGs, and I was really looking forward to actually going and seeing some of these people in person. Going to Free League stand and going to them, grabbing them and shaking them and going, "When are you releasing more Alien stuff?" But yeah, it's. I would say that's. I really am annoyed that that's not happened this year still.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's a good summary of that one. It's lockdown's been really funny. I think it's been good in lots of ways for RPGing for us. I think, as you said, we've been able to open up some games we might not have done otherwise. But equally, it's made me realize I can't play 3 games a week. That's when I was up at 3 games point, it was awesome. But yeah, Christ, it burnt me out.
Yeah, surprising, isn't it? You need like a day, a night off to like watch some telly or something. It's bizarre, isn't it?
It's odd. It was really good fun for the week or two where it was. I think 2 or 3 weeks we had it, but it nearly ended in divorce.
I was going to say, yeah, you kind of have to see your partner at some point. You can't hide this the entire time. You get in trouble.
But I found it. I mean, I was joking earlier that I can't read and do something else at the same time, and that's what I felt. I couldn't flip flop between the different games easily enough, and I was mixing them up. So yeah, 3 games is 2 games a week. That's my limit. I'm going to stick to it going on.
Whilst on the subject of sort of playing online, we've had a few questions from, actually the same question from Philip James Harker and from Mim Clayton as well, about missing playing with friends. So what do we think are the best or easiest way to play board games on things like Zoom and Discord, and what would work well like that? Which is kind of an easy thing to answer and also quite a hard thing to answer, because we've mentioned things like Board Game Arena, we've mentioned things like Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator. So if you've got access to any of those, it does make playing board games online really, really straightforward. But of course, it does mean you need either a Steam account or a tablet or anything like that that supports all of these apps. If you don't have that, or you're not as particularly au fait with the games or the rules or anything like that, it can make it quite hard. If you've got a big cupboard full of these physical games, is it possible to play a board game on Zoom, as in a physical board game? Can you play that? And I think the answer to that is mostly no.
So, interestingly, we mentioned doing the demo of Agamonia with Paul not that long ago. Do you remember doing the demo of Falling Skies?
I do.
Because that was an interesting way of doing it, in that Paul set the game up and pointed the camera at the game. And he knew the rules, and we basically talked through the options and decisions we wanted to make.
Yes.
And then he poked around with the pieces. And it meant a couple of times you were like, well, what does that say on that piece there? And he would have to, well, that's a 5 kind of thing. But that's definitely a way to do it, and definitely one you could do with like small, like restricted games.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you need some cameras, which obviously not everybody will have. You'll need, if any games have any decks of cards in, then that means that someone needs to start managing those decks, because if everyone has a copy of the game, they've got their own copy of the deck, but you'll never be able to shuffle them in the same way to draw the same card physically in front of you. So someone starts to need to manage those decks. So it starts to get very, very complicated very quickly.
See, I think things like code names would work quite well on, just pointing a zoom camera at the grid of things. In fact, I'm pretty sure I heard people were doing using things like PowerPoint in Teams to do code names.
There is actually an online version of it. Alora was playing it with our Bewdley group last weekend, actually, a couple of days ago. They played it last week. They played essentially a version of code names. I don't think it was called code names. It was like code words or something to get around, copyrights or whatever. But it's basically the same sort of idea, and it's essentially just a web interface with a bunch of words on the screen and the whole grid idea that you get in code names.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the interface they used. It was quite a simple word.
Oh, I think I've seen that one. I've forgotten it. Now we've used it as well. I think it's got things like Cards Against Humanity and lots of other card game stuff on it, and I've forgotten what it's called. But yeah, it's all not cards. Yeah, well, obviously for licensing reasons, it can't be called that. But.
Yes. So there are options, but I think playing what we call traditional physical board games over Zoom is quite difficult without some kind of electronic interface.
I think it needs a change in mindset, and I think it's difficult to have that change in mindset. If you think about it, it's like playing chess by like post.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, you need to allow longer for it to happen. You've got to give it some time for somebody to move the pieces for you, or somebody to read out the card for you, or like you said, point out what that counter says. But HD cameras top down, which is the other thing I think you need for it to really work, rather than at an angle, is you kind of want the camera looking down on the table, not at a glancing angle. It can work. I've seen some stuff online of people doing it, but Christ, it's a lot of effort.
That's the thing. It starts to get very fiddly and faffy.
It starts to become more about trying to make it work, and you're working in spite of everything rather than in hand to hand with it.
Yeah.
But I think from our point of view, I can only from board game I can't say much, but from RPGing that we do, it's a good. It transitions to the electronic world really well.
Yes,
we spoke about it last week, and it with the combination of Zoom and Roll20 or one of the other virtual tabletop thingies, it works quite well.
Now, you did actually have a go on Tabletop Simulator, didn't you? So the Agamonia demo you did was Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah.
So I still think, it's not a cost-free option, and it does require a bit of learning to get your head around how the controls work, but I do think that's a really valid way of playing almost anything, because the amount of games they've got in there under the Steam Workshop, potentially a lot of them are unlicensed, but that's a different issue. Means that you've got access to a hell of a lot of games there. When we first started, me and Andy were playing like Great Western Trail on there, and some really complicated Euros. Now, it helps that we knew those games, so we were playing things that we already knew rather than trying to learn the rules. But we also learnt how to play a couple of things like cartographers and things like that, which were relatively simple as well. In fact, the roll and write actually adds why didn't I think of that to begin with? Any single roll and write work game, so like Railroad Inc. Railroad Inc. would be a brilliant one. Cartographers would be a brilliant one, because all those games work by. Go on, you stick your hand up, Mr. Lewis.
I can actually certify that both of those games work over Zoom, because we have been playing them with our board game group in Bewdley. Railroad Inc. works really well, and so does Cartographers. You end up basically you can almost play it with any number of people as well, because what you end up doing is everyone has the Zoom, and one person sort of drives. So one person will need something like Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator, but you end up playing the solo rules. So you still, say for example in Cartographers, you've got a physical piece of paper, this one here, with a little map on it that you can print out.
He has actually got a card. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy has just picked up a cartographer's piece of paper. He had it there ready.
Oh, yeah, I'm prepared, mofos. But you can do the same with Railroad Inc. And so you have your piece of paper in front of you with your little Zoom, with your tablet or whatever, so you can see what's going on. And then the person driving will just literally turn over a card for Cartographers, or roll the dice so everyone can see what it is in something like Tabletopia, and everyone just physically draws on the piece of paper. And then when you get the kind of the player interaction bit, say in Cartographers where you get the monster and you're supposed to give your piece of paper to somebody else and they draw on it, the rules in the solo rules basically say it will appear in this quadrant of the map. You have to put it in given these conditions, and you put it in, and then you carry on. So there's no limit to the number of people who can play the game. And to be fair, it works quite well.
Well, you could also do it without Tabletopia. That you could just get your webcam and point at where you roll, a dice tray and roll the dice into a dice tray. Because I never really realised it before. Now you've just said it, but Tiny Towns is effectively a roll and write. Just you've got wooden pieces. And when lockdown started, AEG were basically doing 1 million player versions of it. So what they were doing was saying, like, we're just going to broadcast the revealing of the cards, which says what pieces you have to take that round.
That's pretty cool.
So anyone could play at home. With that one, you needed a set. You needed to have Tiny Towns to actually play it because you need the little pieces. But you get that card reveal on screen, and then you try and make your map there. And I think you could submit and you score on a chat, and off you go. But things like, as I said, Road Ink and cartographers, you could just do a piece of paper. You don't even need.
It's true.
The official one, really,
no,
do you?
Really.
You can get away with it. There you go.
Job done.
Simple question. Lots of.
It's a difficult one to answer. Although I'm not going to say I'm going to advocate playing cartographers for the rest of your life because it would get boring very quickly. It's a good game, but.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to replace meeting people in face to face and playing it face to face, is it really?
No,
but
it's true.
The world's upside down. You got to find a way to make it work.
So Craig Turner has asked quite a few questions. But I'm going to ask this last one. Now, he uses this particular phrase. He has said, what game has been on your pile of potential the longest? Now, the pile of potential, I'm sorry, I stick with the old name. It's the pile
Shelf
of shame. It's the game. It's a shelf of shame. It's the games I've bought when, what do we call it? Retail therapy or going, the shinies. It's gone on my shelf and I've not played it. And I think myself and Andy have exactly the same game here because we discussed it when I was last at Andy's. Which is Merchants and Marauders.
Yeah. I don't.
Which I bought. I bought at UK Games Expo one year. And I bought it before they moved to the NEC main hall.
Oh, wow. That's 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I went
I went to
the first expo where they were in the main hall. And that was 4 or 5 years ago now.
I think, it's something like that.
Jeez.
Steve, you've just given up your right to be upset when you look at Amanda's cupboards and find clothes with tags on now, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I gave up those rights years ago.
I have to admit, I don't know which one mine is, because Laura and I have been she's been driving me to essentially get through the Shelf of Shame, make sure that, specifically concerning expansions, because I might have one or two of those, so we can play and get through a lot of the games. Now, I've got a lot of Lacerda games on my shelf at the moment, because they're quite hard to learn. If On Mars is anything to go by.
There is that.
I've had Kanban on my shelf for quite a while, and I've learned it twice and keep forgetting it because it's quite complicated. I haven't actually played a proper game of that yet, and I've had that on for quite a few years. So yeah, but Merchants and Marauders, Alora, and this makes it even worse, Alora bought it me as a birthday present, and we've still not played it. And that was at least 3 years ago. At least.
Oh, God, that's
4.
reminded me. Now, Amanda did buy me 1 year a Warhammer 40,000 box set, which was the Dark Elves versus Dark Elves, Dark Angels versus Chaos box set, which was not this version. I think it was the previous version,
7th edition.
So yeah, that might actually be the oldest thing because all those miniatures are still on their sprues.
Wow, that is terrible.
To put it this way, those miniatures are now mostly useless because in the last version they updated Space Marines to Primaris Space Marines, so these are like the normal ones, so I don't think you can even use them in current games.
That must have pissed a lot of people off, actually, when Games Workshop did that.
Well, Games Workshop like to do that,
yeah,
don't
but
they?
I think, at least with previous versions, you could still incorporate, Mark 6, Mark 7, Mark 8 power armor in the same games, whereas if they've just gone, right, everyone, now they're, 10 feet tall, not 7 feet tall. You can't use anything else. Buy all of our stuff again, you mortals. And of course, everybody does, but which is how they make their money. But it's still a little annoying.
Well, there's still a thing in the back of my mind. I might just paint them all as Chaos Marines and say they're fallen Dark Angels, but that'll work.
Yeah, close enough for jazz.
Yeah. So we've had actually a few questions about solo games. So I'm going to try and blend these in as well as I can. So Danielle asks, what is the best solo board or card game that won't take ages to play set up that's under 50 quid? And do they even exist? Whereas Mark Campbell Helm asks, do you feel that the importance of a decent solo or two-player option in what would normally be considered a higher player count game is any more important going forward? Especially when you consider how many of our favourite games have had to remain unplayed over the last 6 months or so. And do you feel that there are enough good two-player and solo playable games already out there that designers do not need to worry going forward? Now, I always struggle with solo play questions because I don't actually play solo games very often. Now, I do play quite a few two-player games, but not solo. So I'll try and answer Danielle's question as best I can to begin with.
I played a few, but go on.
So, a solo card or board game that doesn't take ages to play or set up that's under 50 quid.
That is a very difficult question to answer.
There's a lot of criteria there, a lot of boxes to tick.
It's the under 50 quid bit that's the problem more than anything else. Because I can turn around and go, do you know what? Nemesis is really good, but that's definitely not under 50 quid.
And it's not quick to play or set up
No,
either.
it isn't. It probably takes longer to set it. For a solo game, it probably takes longer to set up than it does to bloody play. But it is very good.
Well, to join two dots here, actually, I would not recommend First Martians either, which is another game on my shelf of shame, which I tried to set up and learn to play, and the setup took so long that I gave up.
I mean, I've played Too Many Bones quite a few times solo. That works really well, but it ain't under 50 quid, and it takes ages to set up. Deep Madness, again, takes bloody ages to set up. Definitely not under 50 quid, but it is good solo. There's tons, but most of them are quite expensive. Ooh.
I've got a good thought. I was about to say, so my brain's just leapt forward 2 steps in my brain rather than outside where you can understand it. You're talking about Arkham Horror. I was about to say, what about Arkham Horror LCG? Because we know, Andy, you've just fallen down that very, very, very deep and expensive
I think I still have one hand hanging from the precipice before I let go, but yes. And that's 30 quid-ish.
30 quid for the base set, and then you kind of want to start buying some expansions for it, which are about 15 quid a story. Now, that is a really, really good game because it is story-based. It's a story-based card game which plays really well solo. And on the same vein, I don't know if you can find it at the moment, but the Lord of the Rings LCG is also quite good for that. It's a simpler game to play compared to Arkham Horror. I think Arkham Horror is more complicated. But I was actually going to suggest the Marvel one from the Marvel LCG.
Oh, yeah.
Which I've forgotten the full name of it now, which is the Fantasy Flight LCG, came out last Christmas. That does not take long to set up or play. You can play it solo, and rather than like the system you got in Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, where it's all about customizing your deck, you can customize your deck in Marvel, but it's really designed to go, I'm going to play Iron Man today, so I'm going to grab the Iron Man deck and let's see if I can beat the shit out of Rhino.
Yeah.
And because of that, it means it's got quite a bit of variability, because I think you get 4 characters in the main game, and I think you get 3 bad guys. So you've already got, several iterations before you got through them. And then there's all the expansions of new heroes. It's Marvel's the infinite number of characters you can throw in there. All these villain scenarios as well. And it's a really, really good game, actually. It's really simple to learn to play. Although me and Adam played it and we're rubbish at it. We couldn't kill Rhino to save our lives. But that's besides the point.
Do you know what is actually quite good that would work solo-ish? It's supposed to be very good. I haven't done it myself, but I've heard it's quite good. Is some of the Tuskegee games, Tolkien, Twati Hadouken, and Tech Henu. They're just about under 50 quid these days.
Yeah, but they can be quite. I think Daniel's after something that can just be played really quickly. Throw it onto the kitchen table and give it a go. Which they're all the right games we mentioned earlier.
Yes, Cartographers, Railroad Inc. Both fall under that category because they're 30 quid, something like that.
Yeah, and you can easily play them quite quick.
But yeah, any sort of basic card games like that could work quite well.
Now, there's one a lot of people swear on. I've not played the physical version. I've got the app version. I was a little bit underwhelmed by it, but a lot of people swear by Onirim. I'm going to have to look this up because I can never get this. It's a game about nightmares, but it's a card game, and it's basically like a solitaire game where you're trying to match keys, and that a lot of people rave around because you can play it really, really quickly. It's got like a scratchy drawing of like this big black cat as like the villain. I can see the artwork, but I can't remember the bloody name of it.
Don't do an image search on Onirim, whatever you do.
Oh no. Are you tearing out your own eyeballs now?
Hang on.
Oh, one that's a good one, the Escape the Dark Sector. That can be played solo. That's quite quick to play.
That's very true and dead easy to set up. And I've recently bought that, and I really enjoy it. We talked about it in 2 podcasts ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that scales really well. Obviously, Escape the Dark Castle, basically the same game but in a fantasy skin. You can find it. There is a current Kickstarter which ends in about a week from now, on the 23rd of November. So I think it ends early December. So if you want to get involved in that, you can do. And I think they're only about £30. Yeah. Which are definitely worth doing. So, yeah, plenty of options.
I think so, yeah. It's going to bug me now what the name of that bloody game is.
Give it 20 minutes, Steve, and it'll come to you.
Yep. Yeah. Once we turn off this podcast and stop recording, Steve will go, oh.
So the other questions regarding solo games. So going back to Mark Capel-Helm's questions, do you feel that the importance of a decent solo or 2-player option in what would normally be considered a what would normally be considered a higher player count game is any more important going forward?
Basically, should games have a solo mode?
Yeah.
No. He says, having played massive games with solo modes. But the thing is, they're all cooperative games. So it's like you could play Pandemic solo if you wanted to. You just play it sort of 2 or 3-handed. So any cooperative games could fall into that category. Hell, you could play Arkham Horror solo if you wanted to. I
have done.
And it works. That's the thing. Anything cooperative could work like that because the game would scale from 1 to 6, depending on obviously what it's designed to do. I think the issue here is, do we think publishers should shoehorn in a solo mode?
Basically, do we want to give more work to Davey?
Yeah, because he is very good at the solo mode.
Do we want to throw more work David Toscini's way? Not David.
Big David Turksey.
David Turksey's ways. And because he designs like solo modes for several games, which are sometimes more complex than the base game
It's
itself.
very true. I mean, I can't, as long as it's not too weird, then I don't really see the harm of it. I think that, I guess what Mark's getting at is there has been over the last couple of years a big push, certainly on Kickstarter, for designers to include or design a solo mode specifically for the game when they may not have originally considered it. Now, as you've said, Steve, we don't really play that many solo games, so it's not really something that we can probably comment on that heavily. I have, but again, all of the games I've played are cooperative games. I mean, I don't look at something like, Teotihuacan, which has a dedicated solo mode, and think I want to play that solo. It just doesn't appeal to me.
No.
Doesn't it depend what you're trying to get out of the game, though? And I think you're always going to have a detriment if the game is designed for 4 people or 6 people, and you try and shoehorn in a single-player mode or a 2-player mode. It is going to feel weird. I think you should move. I think this question comes from lockdown, doesn't it? It comes from not being able to get 4 people in a room or 6 people in a room.
Yes.
So for me, it's don't change the game. Find a way to work around the other limitations and find a way to play with 4 or 6 people is going to be a far more robust, longer-term solution to the problem without fucking games up.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
There we go. Voice of reason from Mr. Gill.
I've got little else to add to solo games, mate, but I can add.
Well, none of us do.
Find some tech to work a way around it.
That's the thing, none of us do. We don't play them, so we don't know.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, he does have a related question. It says, do you feel there are enough good 2-player and solo games already out there? do designers need to worry? And I think there is. I think there's plenty of options available for solo and 2-player games already. I don't think it needs to be personally. I don't think it needs to be a special consideration. It's not going to hurt, but as Sid alluded to, you don't want to shoehorn a solo variant in, and some games just don't work and are never going to work with solo variants in there.
No.
I've resisted buying it, but the remake of the Dune board game, because we all know how we all love Dune. I mean, I've basically already got it in a different format when Fantasy Flight reskinned it into Rex to go in the Twilight Imperium, but one of the reasons I haven't got that is it's really a 6-player game.
Yeah.
And it's the same reason why I've not bought the expansion to Game of Thrones, because it's a 6-player game. And I want to play these games, but even before lockdown, I was struggling to get these games to the table.
Very true. I mean, it's the same as Battlestar Galactica, New Angeles, all of these that really need, 5 or 6 players. Who Goes There? Dead of Winter, that really needs 5, But anything with hidden information, you need a higher player count to sort of make the subterfuge more effective. Because if you're playing a game like that with only 3 players, it's him. So, you're off now, it's you, isn't it? You're a dick. It's going to be you, for God's sake. And it's really hard to hide yourself in a game like that.
Right then, boys, I think that's us for today.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. So, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We have been Polyhedron Collider. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Somebody actually asked us recently, we're on Spotify, and for some reason I don't have a link in the show notes to Spotify, but yes, we are on there, and you don't need to have a paid account to listen to us on Spotify. You can watch us on the free account without adverts.
There's value for you.
That's Uncle Steve's picking up the tab.
If you want to chat to us, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Board Game Geek Guild 2726, but we are on Twitter at Polyhedron C. I'm at Wahoffel
I'm at Sonic H with a 0. John is at John_Cage, and Rory is at Rory J. Summers. We also have a, squandering website at the moment. It's gathering dust and cobwebs at polyhedroncollider.com, where we have written reviews and some recent video reviews as well. Both myself and Steve have done some video reviews there, and we both fully intend to do some more at some point.
I've recorded another one.
Ooh!
I don't know when I'm going to edit it, though, because I've now got to edit this podcast. As well as the 3 RPG sessions or whatever it is we said we're going to do this week as well.
It's amazing how much we've got. I tweeted the other day about, we're all on lockdown here. You'd think I don't have a commute. I don't have I don't have to go anywhere on my lunch break. I'm literally at home. You'd think I'd have more time for this kind of thing, and yet somehow I have less. What the hell's going on?
I think I know the reason for that, but we can't broadcast it, so I'll keep my mouth shut.
It's a left-handed website.
Hey, whoa, I wasn't going there, right? I'm the new guy. I'm not ready to go there yet. But absolutely correct, Steve.
And with that revelation, we shall bid you good day and happy gaming.
Good grief, Tudor.